here we go. Hello, YouTube. My name is Stefan Hartman, physician assistant, exercise science specialist, and owner at ironmedicinepa.com. Today, I bring you a critical analysis of vegan nutrition studies. You may have heard of many of these studies before from popular Instagram influencers, and we're going to take a close look at these. So, Dr. Kim Williams, he's a past president of the American College of Cardiology. He said there are two kinds of cardiologists, vegans and those who haven't read the data. While I'm not a cardiologist, I am a physician assistant. I was trained with critical thinking skills. I was trained to read research, evaluate it for myself, and I've come to a different conclusion. It really comes down to two different theories. One, do we still believe the lipid hypothesis is true? And do we continue to advocate low-fat diets and statins to prevent heart disease? Or have we seen how the lipid hypothesis is based off of flawed data and we are searching for a deeper understanding to heart disease as it is linked to inflammation and using this knowledge to help prevent cardiovascular mortality in patients? The summary contents in this lecture is going to be a bit of the lipid hypothesis. We did a whole lecture on this, debunking this, back in my part 1 of Things We Say for No Reason in Medicine. 2, do vegan diets reduce cardiometabolic risk via reducing inflammation, or is it more that the diet eliminates processed foods? Studies that claim that vegans have lower BMI, yes, but does BMI account for muscle mass as well? No. Vegan studies that laud their health benefits do not stand on their own under critical thinking evaluation. There are several widely quoted vegan studies, namely the EPIC, the Nurses Health Study, and the EatLancet Study. And we're going to review these and find their flaws. Is meat causing insulin resistance? No. We're just going to debunk this off the bat. It is a temporarily insulin resistance on keto that you can sometimes see in these trials. And the concept that a human can absorb protein equally well from plant-based sources as well as meats is an evolutionary fallacy. And that's going to be more in my part 2. It's going to come later on this next week. So vegans can get all their nutrition from plants is called textbook reductionism, because animal meats are not nutritionally identical to plant protein. Non-protein amino acids such as taurine, carnosine, L-arginine, selenium, and much more are found in meats and not plants. Branch-chain amino acids, things that bodybuilders use to prevent delayed onset muscle soreness, are found only in meat. And things like NAD+, a ubiquitous energy molecule, is found in meat. No, but more of that in the next lecture. Exercise and protein intake, a synergistic approach against sarcopenia. We're seeing kind of a widespread epidemic of sarcopenia in the US and across the world. Sarcopenia, for those who don't understand it, is a muscle mass deficiency, and there's no real ICD-10 code for this. No one's diagnosing it, but granted to say, it's everywhere. You've probably seen it a couple times today. But it's from a lack of exercise, yes, lack of muscle building, but a lack of protein, lack of nutritious muscle building protein. So veganism is not compatible with evolution. Consider the paper Paleolithic Nutrition, a great paper. I highly recommend everybody reading it. We are predators. We have a stomach acidity similar to that of some birds of prey, for example, the bald eagle, which, as you've probably seen, likes to rip apart live prey and eat it raw. And we have a stomach acidity that is equal to these birds of prey, meaning that we evolved to eat carrion, even though it may seem a bit distasteful to some. We evolved towards the dependency on animal foods. One of our essential micronutrients, vitamin B12, is found only in animal foods. Similarly, the richest sources of iron, iodine, folic acid, or folate, and vitamin A are in animal foods only, especially organ meats. And the most common nutrient deficiencies today are associated with low meat consumption. Iron deficiency anemia is prevalent in both rich and poor countries, while iodine deficiency affects up to 2 billion people worldwide, resulting in goiter. Animal meats have higher quantity of vitamins compared to fruits and veggies, and this may seem counterintuitive based on what we've been programmed to believe. Folic acid deficiencies cause a birth defect in which the brain and spinal cord do not develop normally, a condition known as a neural tube defect. Now the government has supplemented our food with a synthetic form of folic acid to prevent this. It's a great experiment. We do not know the effects of this. And although dark leafy greens are good sources of folic acid, the very rich source is animal liver, a commodity regularly consumed by hunter-gatherer ancestors. Finally, humans have a finite capacity to convert the yellow-orange colored carotenoids in plant foods into vitamin A. Today, vitamin A deficiency blindness is the most common cause of vision loss in the world, and again, the richest sources of vitamin A are in liver and animal flesh. So we evolved to eat the whole animal. Vegans have a lower BMI. So a lot of studies that, we know that higher BMI is correlated with higher risk of cardiovascular mortality. Many studies will point towards vegans having lower BMI and thus supposedly healthier. But is this really true? Possibly not, because we know that BMI, any general practitioner worth of salt knows that BMI is a flawed measurement. You measure someone's height and weight. You put them on a scale and you tell them they have a BMI. Oh, you have a BMI of this. I'm actually considered a bit overweight. Now, that's because if you just look at my BMI with nothing else, you don't look what's underneath the shirt, you don't see the muscle mass that I have, you would think that I'm overweight. I'm not. I just have a lot of muscle mass, and muscle weighs a lot compared to fat. And fat takes up more volume, though. In vegan studies, they also don't analyze visceral fat. So visceral fat, if I've talked to you about much on this channel, is fat on the organs, so such as non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. I dedicate a whole video to that and how dangerous it is. Fat on the organs is known as visceral fat, and none of these vegan studies analyze this, right? And as we know, visceral fat is an independent risk factor for all-cause mortality. So let's look at another study. Effective restriction of vegans' diets on muscle mass, oxidative status, and myocyte differentiation, a pilot study. Significant decrease in muscle mass index and lean body mass in vegan compared to vegetarian and omnivore groups, and higher serum homocysteine level in vegetarian vegans compared to omnivores. That's what the study found. It's kind of concerning as well, and most vegan studies will not indicate lean body mass in their study results. Parallels of vegan diet with sarcopenia. Yes, so vegan diets do not support the body's hormones. There are sarcopenic changes associated with a decrease in growth hormone and IGF-1 levels, frequently demonstrated in elderly people. So we want to support our body's hormones. We get the proper hormones from the organ meats and the animal meats. Let's look at this. Sarcopenic obesity, known as skinny fat or muscle wasting, large free fat mass or visceral fat. It is under-recognized. As I said, there's no ICD-10 diagnosis for this. This is Dr. Michael Greger. He is a vegan physician that promotes the website nutritionfacts.org. It's not factual at all. It's all propaganda on his website. But a lot of people believe what he says. Muscle mass loss in the elderly is associated with increased fat mass. The imbalance between skeletal muscle and visceral fat mass in older individuals occurs even in the absence of significant changes in BMI. So again, very important to point out why BMI is not helpful. Reductions in muscle mass and physical activity levels decrease total energy expenditures, results in the accumulation of fat mass, especially visceral fat. Let's talk about veganism is by definition high carb. So this diet is contraindicated in 88% of the population because a lot of population is on the metabolic syndrome spectrum. And it's contraindicated a high carb diet in diabetics. This can be quite harmful. As we've discussed many times on this channel, there are benefits to low carbohydrate, higher fat diets in diabetics. As we can see here. But I've talked about this enough, so we're not going to talk about it here. Vegan nutrition studies are inherently bias. So we can't talk about these studies without talking about the Seventh-day Adventists and what's been going on for the past half century. I did a whole review on this and things we say and do for based off flawed evidence, part 2. You can find that on my channel here. Kind of interesting in the news, a low-carb physician in Australia, Dr. Gary Fetke, he was censored and had his license revoked by the Australian government for trying to implement this for his patients. And in the court case, because obviously he went to court to fight this, they had a professor come on from the Australian Health Practitioners Regulatory Agency, so he sounds quite official, right? He was the expert witness, but he was employed by the Sanitarium Health and Wellbeing Company, which is the Seventh-day Adventists. And he used a Seventh-day Adventist textbook, a nutrition textbook. So, as many of you know, if you've talked to some nutritionists, a lot of the teachings ubiquitous in the nutrition community are funded or based off of Seventh-day Adventist studies. So essentially, they are religious bias embedded into teachings at university level, and especially in nutrition programs. And as we saw here in this court case, that they were using religious text, essentially, if we think of it that way, religious text in a court case, as a religious text in the shape of science. Animal protein intake is associated with insulin resistance in the Adventist Health 2 calibration sub-study, a cross-sectional analysis. And we're going to look at this because I've seen some vegan proponents push this. Let's look at this. So they were like, oh, it's a big study. They looked at 96,000 people. Okay, what were these people? Oh, they were Seventh-day Adventists in the United States. Okay, let's go on here. What did the study examine? The study examined only 548 participants. That's kind of a small sample size. But how did they talk to these patients? Did they control them? Did they look at them in a controlled setting? No. Telephone calls were placed to patients every 6 months, and they were asked to remember what they ate on average. Can you remember what you ate on average over the past 6 months? I'm pretty sure you couldn't tell me what you had for breakfast 2 days ago. So it's a very flawed study based on a small sample size that was biased in origin because they're Seventh-day Adventists. And it was done by biased researchers at Loma Linda University, which is a Seventh-day Adventist university. So, huge flaw. And if we're talking about medical science, the bias in this is astounding. And using this in any sort of argument to support any theory is a fallacy. Let's see. Dietary intake of total animal and vegetable protein intake and risk type 2 diabetes in a European perspective investigation to cancer and nutrition, the EPIC study. Big one. I hear this one very often from vegan proponents. So let's look at what they did. Results. Mean protein intake was 75.7 grams a day. Animal protein for the majority. The main contributors to protein intake were meat, 39%, milk products, 29%, and cheese, 18% for animal protein, and bread, 43%. So 43% of their diet was bread. Does that sound like a carnivore diet to you? No, that sounds like a food pyramid diet that's been implemented for the past 50 years and brought us the obesity and diabetes epidemic that we now have. So these results show that these patients that filled out health questionnaires were essentially following a food pyramid meal plan. So again, it was health questionnaires. These were not controlled trials. Their data analysis section and their conclusions are conflicting. The data analysis does not find an association between animal meat intake and increase in diabetes. The conclusion reads, in the study, high total and animal protein intake, but not vegetable protein intake, were associated with increased diabetes risk. The relation was not explained by specific protein sources, such as meat, or by weight change. In those diagnosed with diabetes, we did not see a reference range to compare how much exercise versus how much calories were being consumed. So a lot of flaws in this study, but I hear it all the time. The EPIC Oxford study shows that there's cancer and diabetes in animal meat eaters. I wouldn't call them animal meat eaters. I would call them food pyramid followers. So enough of the EPIC Oxford. The Nurses' Health Study. This one I really enjoy. One of the longest running studies on heart health in nurses. Very interesting. Let's see what quote here. The researchers suggested that consuming foods with higher levels of antioxidants and fiber to help combat inflammation, such as green leafy vegetables, kale, spinach, cabbage, arugula, yellow vegetables, blah blah blah, whole grains, coffee, tea, and wine. The researchers also suggested limiting intake of refined sugars and grains. Okay, you got me there. Fried food sodas, I can agree with that, and restricting processed red and organ meat. Oh, wait, hold on again. Processed red and organ meat, are we talking about like hot dogs? I can agree with that. Are we talking about like organ meats? Because I don't know of any nurse who actually eats organ meats. Like, are you eating like a clean laborivore? Like no nitrates added. Obviously, they didn't look at that. They didn't look if there were nitrates added to the food. They didn't look if they were eating hot dogs or if they were eating like a liverwurst or a kidney or a heart from the organ of the animal. No, they were not looking at this. This was a recall study in nurses. And then they went on to draw the conclusion that you should limit red meat from this and limit organ meat. It's completely bogus. Yeah, we can agree on some things, like avoiding sugars, grains, and refined, foods like that. Blue zone dwellers. This is a good one. We've all heard of blue zone dwellers, like Sardinia, Italy, Greece. But they may not be living longer because of how they live, but because of poor record keeping. Wait, what? Repeat that? The observation of individuals attaining remarkable ages and their concentration into geographic subregions or blue zones has generated considerable scientific interest. Proposed drivers of remarkable longevity include high vegetable intake, strong social connections, and genetic markers. Here we reveal new predictors of remarkable longevity and supercentenarian status. In the United States, supercentenarian status is predicted by the absence of vital registration. So wait, repeat that? Birth records? The state-specific interdiction of birth certificates is associated with a 69 to 82% fall in the number of supercentenarian records. In Italy, which has more uniform vital registration, remarkable longevity is instead predicted by low per capita incomes and short life expectancy. Finally, designated blue zones of Sardinia, Okinawa, and Ikaria corresponded to regions with low incomes, low literacy, high crime rates, and short life expectancy relative to their national average. As such, relative poverty and short lifespan constitute unexpected predictors of centenarian and supercentenarian status and support a primary role of fraud and error in generating remarkable human age records. That's very interesting. I never want to hear from blue zone dwellers again. Is veganism safe in children? The Veggie Diet Study. So there's a physician on Instagram who sent me this because I was asking him, like, your child looks way too healthy. You can't be feeding him just a vegan diet from birth onwards. I don't think it's possible. Has there ever been studies on this? And he's like, yes, it's completely safe. Here's the study. So I looked at the study. I actually read what he was sending me. The Veggie Diet Study. One, it's a good study because it's not from the Seventh-day Adventists, done by Germans in Germany. So what did they find? The Veggie Diet Study, anthropometrics did not significantly differ between the diet groups and indicated an average normal growth in all groups. However, more vegetarian and vegan than omnivore children were classified as stunted or wasted. So there was a not insignificant number of vegan and vegetarian children who were harmed by the diet. And this was done in German families who were implementing a vegan or plant-based diet in their children compared to omnivorous children who, they eat meats and so forth. So this vegan researcher, he may have glossed over that he could potentially be harming his child, that there was not insignificant risk that he was harming his child by raising the child from birth as a vegan. And I pointed out to him that there's not a chance that this child will live his whole life without eating meat. There's not a chance. This child will eventually eat meat one day. I didn't like that I said that, but it's true. There has not been one documented case trial, one patient ever studied from birth to 100 years old consuming only veganism. It's not been done. So it's an experiment. He's experimenting on his child, whether he likes that term or not. Vegan diets contain high omega-6 sources. I should probably do a video on this, but high omega-6, so these includes the vegetable oils, these seeds, these nuts. And these may actually be driving some disease. We've traditionally thought of these sources as healthy, but potentially if you're consuming a lot of sunflower, safflower oils, these vegetable oils, seed oils, and you're consuming a lot of these nuts too, you could potentially be creating an inflammatory ratio inside your body, driving some metabolic disease. So very interesting, and potentially we want to limit omega-6s rather than increase them. Here's a discussion by some research on the EatLancet study, which I hear about a lot. So a couple points that they found flaws in the study. A combined effect of the aforementioned issues suggests that the recommended diet from the EatLancet report is based on misspecified modeling approach that might, at best, overpromise on the mortalities avoided, and at worst promote a solution favoring high-income countries that does not address the pressing issues of maternal and child malnutrition. These issues contribute 3 to 5 times the total disability-adjusted life years than dietary factors in low and middle-low socioeconomic index countries, according to the Global Burden of Disease. A truly effective global solution to the problem of human nutrition and environmental impact must be replicable, transparent, and supported with correct quantification of impact. So, really, veganism is something that low socioeconomic countries are forced to implement, such as we can use like Ethiopia, for example, or Ghana, some countries where they don't have access to large amounts of meats or high quality meats, so they're forced to eat a lot of flour and grains and so forth, and they do not get enough nutrients, and so they do have stunted growth, they do have disease that we don't have here. But they're also having disease that we do have here: diabetes, insulin resistance, hypertension, these sort of things are becoming more common in these countries. But then the affluent, areas in the U.S., you're going to see more vegans or vegetarians, and this is because you have access to supplements. You're able to give yourself B12 shots. You're able to go shop at Whole Foods, get organic groceries, get the best produce that's always fresh, and trying to get all these nutrients from various places. It's just not possible if you live in a country that doesn't have access to these things. So you're going to need to rely more on meat. That's how you're going to get these nutrients. It's how you're going to improve your life expectancy. So the EatLancet is a study that promotes more of a plant-based approach to diet, supposedly that it's more healthy, but it doesn't really look at the socio-demographics of these patients and whether it's even feasible for the planet. So a lot of flaws with it. Animal source food sustainability problem or malnutrition and sustainability solution. Perspective matters. So globally, 2 billion people suffer from micronutrient deficiencies. 151 million children under 5 suffer from stunting, and millions have impaired cognitive development related to poor nutrition. This is partly due to insufficient consumption of animal-sourced foods, which supply multiple bioavailable nutrients. Yes, we understand this. Yet reports like the one recently published by EatLancet's Commission solely focus on the threat of animal-sourced foods consumption on sustainability and human health, and they overestimate and ignore the tremendous variability in the environmental impact of livestock production and fail to adequately include the experience of marginalized women and children in low and middle-income countries whose diets regularly lack the necessary nutrients. Yet animal-sourced foods have been described by the World Health Organization as the best source of high-quality, nutrient-rich food for children aged 6 to 23 months. Livestock and animal-sourced foods are vital to sustainability as they play a critical role in improving nutrition. So, what can we agree with the vegans? One, maybe calorie in, calorie out is not conducive to long-term metabolic health. Food sources matter. We just disagree on which food source. Fried vegetable and seed oils are harmful. Maybe we don't agree on that so much, because vegans do use a lot of fried vegetable and seed oils. Avoid sugar, soda, and high fructose corn syrup. Yeah, I think we can agree with that. And avoid refined processed foods. Yes, I would say for the most part, it really It matters how you process your food, whether you're putting nitrates in there, whether you're putting sugars in there. You can get a pretty clean liverwurst. I've had it before, and yes, it's a processed organ meat, but it's really clean. It's just kind of ground up, beef, heart, liver, and kidney. It's really tasty. You just put a bit of salt in there and maybe some spices. It's probably the best tasting way to get your liver. So some conclusions here. There's a high degree of inherent bias in vegan nutrition studies. Plant protein has lower bioavailability, and plant proteins is an inferior source of tyrosine and nicotinamide, the latter of which is studied as a building block of NAD+ in life, aka life itself. And we're going to be talking more about that in the next episode, which is going to be a pretty fun one. Lack of adequate protein intake affects billions of people worldwide, and the protein that they're lacking is animal-sourced foods. Vegan studies often cite lower BMI as a positive finding supporting the diet. Unfortunately, BMI is a notoriously poor marker, and we should throw it out entirely. There has not been a single adult who has completed a full life of veganism in the literature and been monitored on health parameters. It doesn't exist. If you have it, I'm welcome to read it. I mean, I'd love to. Let's see. Blue zone dwellers may live longer because of poor birth record keeping. Yep. Veganism, vegetarianism is not insignificant risk in the developing child. So we went over a lot in this. I hope you all enjoyed it. I'm going to put a link in here. You'll be able to click on any of the sources, read it for yourself. There's a couple really good articles in here. Probably my favorite was the what was it? The Paleolithic Nutrition. That one. Read that one. Very good one. I'll talk to you all in the next episode. It's going to be on why you should be eating more meat. See ya.